Alrighty, welcome back to Shut Up and Ball. I am Aaron Chow, accompanied by Mr. John Harris. As always, we're back sharing our Week 3 reactions to the NFL. As always, the script never disappoints, even though there is no script. And yeah, we're gonna dive right into it. Obviously, pick-wise, we'll go more in depth, with our picks later. But standings-wise, it was your week, John. You went 9-7 in terms of just the picks. I went 6-10 against the spread. So with that, you've regained the lead record-wise, and then you've also regained the lead money-wise, as you are back in the positives overall. You had a really good week, plus 600. So overall, you are plus 160. I had another negative week. This one was real bad, minus 350. I'll have to check the math because that's adding up to 60-50. Nonetheless, I know I was in the negative for mine, as obviously the record showed that too. So a little bit unfortunate for me. Still a long season, but let's dive into it, as every week is crucial. Going to start with the Thursday night game, and that is the Niners. They took care of business against the New York Giants, 30-12. That wasn't too much of a shocker. I think for either of us, we both picked San Francisco. Yes, so we're right on that, obviously, and obviously Niners took care of business. What are your thoughts on the Thursday night game, John?
It went largely as expected. I did think that the Giants I would say first half, but like towards the end of the second quarter, the Niners started to pull away. But the Giants looked like at least competitive defensively to start, but they just had absolutely no offense, which, no Saquon Barkley in this game, as we know. So that led to Matt Breida being the leading rusher, but they didn't really commit to the run almost at all, which I thought was a little bit surprising. Although, Matt Breida only got 4 carries. He got 17 yards, which is over 4 yards a carry, including a touchdown. So I don't know. It seems like it wasn't as if they were just getting completely destroyed. Now, Gary Brightwell did. He had 4 carries for 5 yards. But at least in the case of Breida, like, he was having some success. So I don't know. It seems like they only ran 11 times. So even with Brightwell, it seems like just in general, they could have committed to the run more. 3 of those runs were from the quarterback as well. So it seems like before the game got out of hand, there was still some potential plays to be made on the ground, because things weren't much better in the air either. They threw it 32 times, and that resulted in Daniel Jones having 137 yards and 1 interception. So I don't know. This is kind of the worry with this offense without Saquon Barkley is, you added Darren Waller, but none of the receivers still scare you. The offensive line, in large part, is mediocre, and I think Andrew Thomas did not play.
Yeah, he was out for this game too. That's one of those where, he was out.
Yeah, and without him too, that it's tough whenever you lose your best offensive lineman, but just in general, like, he's the guy on the offensive line, and the rest of the line, I wouldn't say is impressive enough that you can just slot in a backup and they'll pick up the slack by maybe, throwing a tight end that way and then be fine, because the rest of the line still has to worry about some of, just their general weaknesses. So yeah, I wasn't super impressed with the Giants. And meanwhile, on the other side, it was business as usual for the 49ers. So yeah, kind of a unsurprising result.
Yeah, only thing I really want to add on that was this, you mentioned Niners kind of got off to a slow start, and Matthew Miller pointed this out on Twitter pretty well during the game. Kind of saw Brock Purdy as an off game, or not really an off game, but you kind of saw why we've been kind of trying to put the water on the hype, on the Brock Purdy train, because he missed some throws this game. Now, granted, it's Wink Martindale. There's a lot of blitzes and a couple of, just putting guys one-on-one. But we saw a couple times Purdy missed some throws, or there were throws that were close to being intercepted, things like that. You saw the lack of velocity was mainly what Matt Miller pointed out too. And it could be, he is coming off an elbow injury, but that's really the only point I could really nitpick for the Niners. Like you mentioned, they approached the game well. They weren't trying to, blow them out immediately. Were patient, and obviously, their defense took care of business, and their offense, eventually got going late in this game. And obviously Debo got going, but did get hurt, so we'll see his status going forward. But nonetheless, Niners took care of business on Thursday night. Not a shocker. and you pretty much wax clearly for the Giants. So I have nothing else to add in regards to the Giants. So good win for the Niners on Thursday night as they stay undefeated.
Which might we just add to with the Giants, which, I mean, it's only 3 games, so still in don't overreact territory, but they're a crazy second half comeback away against the Cardinals from starting out 0-3. So it's a rough start for the Giants right now. Now their schedule it was not the easiest. I mean, you had to play the Cowboys and the 49ers, who coming into the season were viewed as 2 of the top 3 teams in the NFC, but it does put the pressure on now that they can't have games like they did the first half of Arizona. Like, they got to capitalize on those games where they're the favorite.
Agreed. So we'll see if the Giants can kind of turn things around, get Saquon and Andrew Thomas back healthy to help that turnaround. But let's go over, speaking of injured running backs, to Cleveland, to the Sunday games. Browns' first game without Nick Chubb, starting. They played against the Titans. However, it was no issue as they beat the Tennessee Titans 27-3. Pretty resounding beatdown. Titans offense seemed like they couldn't get anything going. What were your thoughts in regards to this one?
Well, first off, shout out to Deshaun Watson, because, I mean, we issued the challenge last week that no Nick Chubb, you got to step up. And the Titans' run defense showed up as we expected. Like, Pierre Strong had some decent runs, but outside of that, I mean, they had 31 total carries for 78 yards. That's 2.5 yards per carry total. And they got creative too. Like, Harrison Bryant, a tight end, got 2 carries. Marquise Goodwin and Elijah Moore, both receivers, were getting carries. So, like, they were getting creative with it, but just in general, they got almost nothing on the ground, including Jerome Ford. Despite the fact that he got 2 touchdowns, he had 10 carries for 18 yards. So you could see that the Titans' run defense showed up, but Deshaun Watson was able to have almost 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He was 27-33, so he had like a really solid game. So shout out to Deshaun Watson. And it could be also just a reflection of maybe the Titans defense as a whole, because we've mentioned that the cornerback room is a lot of younger guys that they've drafted over the last 3-4 years. There's also quite a few guys in there that have not been able to play all of those years due to injury. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes moving forward with the Titans, but the passing defense does not look great for them because, I mean, Justin Herbert tore them apart the week before as well. So, yeah, but, I mean, good on Deshaun Watson. And then on the other side, I mean, I didn't really watch a ton of this game. I was seeing the highlights once again on Red Zone, and they had no offense. Like, we just talked about the lack of offense for the Giants. It was even worse for the Titans. Tannehill only had 104 passing yards. Derrick Henry had 11 carries for 20 yards. That's tough. And, like, I think at halftime he had -7 yards. So things are not looking good over there in Tennessee. But I don't think this is surprising, at least for me. I don't know how you feel, but this is why I was kind of questioning why DeAndre Hopkins signed with this team, because it just did not feel like there was necessarily going to be a great offensive unit that this squad was going to be able to put out. I thought maybe if Derrick Henry could continue to be carrying the offense in his old ways that he once was, that they would be able to, like, do what they previously had done, and Hopkins and Treylon Burks and these guys might be able to contribute, and Tannehill wouldn't have to throw a ton. But when you're averaging less than 2 yards a carry, this offense is going to go absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, I mean, I was a little bit higher on Tennessee, but I think I was more higher on their defense. So I am with you. It's a little bit disappointing there. But, I mean, kudos to the Browns. And also, by the way, Watson and Amari Cooper probably should have had another touchdown. I'm not sure if you saw that one replay where they called Amari Cooper out, even though he did not step out, and he like.
Yeah, I did see that one. Yeah,
we've seen
this. That was crazy because it wasn't even like close.
No, not like
there was like a good 2 inches between him and like any bit of white.
I know we're trying to lessen injuries and things like that, but the refs, like, that's happened a couple of times. Like, let the play out, and then, like, as always, like, you get to review it if it's a quote unquote touchdown. Like, every touchdown turnover is reviewed, so let the play out until it's absolutely dead for sure. Just blow the whistle. It's because it happened week 1. We didn't get to really talk about it to, like, the Saints. They had like a strip sack, but they called the quarterback like already down, like things. I feel like we talk about it every year, and we're gonna keep talking about it until it's more consistent. But Not that it cost the Browns, obviously. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's good to see Watson get back on track, at least, and with Amari Cooper. And they got Elijah Moore involved, the guy who they traded for, someone you're high on, and someone who's shown flashes, too, of being at least a good NFL receiver. So, yeah, and not concerned about the run game, like you mentioned, because Tennessee has a good run defense. And for Tennessee, a lot of people, even like experts and such, a lot of people are theorizing that they may be in fire sale mode. I just looked it up. Tannehill on the last year of his contract. So, maybe, I know Jets fans are screaming for every quarterback in free agency. I'm not saying that it'll be a perfect fit, but who knows what happens with, Tannehill, Derrick Henry. And maybe you mentioned D-Hop. Maybe the plan was, hey, we'll just try to feed you the ball or try to feature you the first, until around trade deadline. And maybe they, ship him off to a team that is, wanting to bolster their wide receiver room or something of the sort. So we'll see what happens with the Titans. But yeah, the Browns, and also, Titans offensive line, we mentioned it before the season started, like patchwork, work in progress, and definitely showed as I'm sure people have seen that one clip where Myles Garrett's moving back and forth and they're literally having two tight ends, try to follow him because they got issues on the offensive line. And that wasn't the only way it showed, as Tannehill also got sacked 5 times. So, yeah, it's just rough times for the Tennessee offense. So we'll see if they somehow figure it out. They've done it kind of in years past, but it feels like the magic's running out right now in terms of, especially with Tannehill, and Henry at this point. So we'll see what happens for the Titans. And for the Browns, they just keep rolling, and their defense been looking better so far, at least coming this part of the season. So we'll see what happens there. Speaking of defenses and kind of another blowout game, we're going to Detroit, where the Lions, they got to 2-1, giving the Falcons their first loss of the season, 20-6. It was pretty much all Lions, it seemed like. But what were your thoughts on this one?
Man, I expected a little bit better out of Atlanta. I'm not going to lie. I was kind of disappointed in general because although Kyle Pitts did have his not career best game, but the best game he's probably had in quite a long time, considering how poorly they use him. He was like the leading receiver with 41 yards. I don't know. I still think it's too early to call Desmond Ridder bad, but I wasn't high on him coming out. I didn't think he was a starting level quarterback, and the guy I think is like top 3 in the NFL in pass attempts right now, despite being bottom 3 in completion percentage. He's averaging he's like completing around like 55% of his passes, I'm pretty sure, on the season. So it's just not looking good. It's not looking good, and this is a game in which, 3 games in a row now we're talking about a lack of a run game. The Atlanta couldn't run the ball. They had Algier get 7 carries for 12 yards. Bijan had 10 carries for 33. Like there just wasn't anything like happening. And I think Detroit knew that. And, Dan Campbell's a smart coach. He came out there and he said, if we can stop the run, we stop this team. And that's exactly what happened. And so, yeah, and that forced Atlanta into throwing mode. The Detroit offense was able to play, I think, a lot more balanced in what they really want to be, and that's 31 carries, 33 passing attempts, like very 50-50 in terms of total offense. Their playmakers got heavily involved. Jahmyr Gibbs getting 18 touches. Amon St. Brown got 9 receptions. Sam Laporta had a big game. This is what Detroit wants to be, and yeah, good on their defense specifically, because Atlanta is an incredibly one-dimensional team, similar to, I think, Tennessee. Now Atlanta is younger, so we give them a little bit more time, and we cut them some more slack. Like, it doesn't feel as
hopeless,
negative as it does. Yeah, hopeless for as we're Tennessee. Like, you're talking about everybody, they're going to turn to a seller at the trade deadline. Atlanta probably won't be that, just because there's so much potential still. But at the same time, when it comes down to this season, right here, right now, they couldn't run the ball and they lost. And this is going to send a message to the rest of the NFL, which I think they already knew that, but this is just going to make it so much more clear. You commit all your resources to stopping the run, and the pass attack, whether it's the schemes or the pass protection or Desmond Ridder's decision making or whatever, is just it hasn't shown the ability to work.
Yeah, I'm more, and I was a little bit higher on Ritter than you technically, but I remember I had the caveat.
You had him at 4.
But the caveat was like
5.
athletic. Like he has more athleticism than Howell,
Yeah.
too. But nonetheless, yeah, I'm with. It's just not been good by Ritter. Like, and I know obviously the outside of really Pitts and London, both are just kind of struggle in terms of separation. They're obviously big targets, but struggle in terms of separation. But nonetheless, I mean, if we're comparing them kind of to obviously like a Tennessee, because Arthur Smith came from there, like this team has more talent, and yeah, it'd be very interesting to see the next following few weeks how it plays out for Atlanta, because I can see Arthur, like we talked about maybe Tannehill being shipped if Tennessee decides to do a fire sale at the trade deadline. Like, hey, why wouldn't Arthur? I wouldn't be shocked if Arthur Smith gives them a call and brings in Tannehill, because it seems like Atlanta, although we've been, especially you and I, have been like, hey, y'all should probably, not really, y'all should probably tank, embrace the rebuild. Arthur Smith has obviously got them, and I understand you want to institute a culture, a winning culture. So, but yeah, I haven't seen the steps necessary from Desmond Ritter to give me confidence that he can be their starting quarterback and that they can win games going forward. Like you said, there was obviously the kind of book is out on regards to how to defend the Atlanta offense. So, yeah, we'll see if Ritter can adjust and improve, and obviously the offense itself as well. And then, yeah, you already hit on the offense for Detroit, just balanced. Shout out Sam Laporta. I mean, a rookie tight end. Very rarely does a rookie tight end come in and just produce the way he's done the first few weeks. And there's a guy that they were high on, and it's worked out. And yeah, you mentioned Gibbs. Good to see that they're giving him a good amount of workload there. So, yeah, a big win for the Lions. They increased to 2-1. Have a short week and see my Packers later this week for Thursday night. But nonetheless, like I said, 2-1 for both these teams. So Atlanta, although it's like we said, not as hopeless as Tennessee, obviously the record much better. So sure that they can turn around, and probably more talent Atlanta as in terms of roster as a whole, at least in my opinion.
Well, let me throw out a question to you. Once again, I don't think it's fully ready. Like, oh my gosh, burn the ships. Desmond Ritter's terrible. But if you were to put a different quarterback in there, and I'm not even talking like a high-end QB, like let's say you just flipped Jared Goff over to the Falcons, with their current schedule, I don't see any reason as to why this team could not be like the 4th best team in the NFC.
Yeah.
And not even in just like the 4th seed. I mean, like literally behind Dallas, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. Like you put like a quarterback like a Jared Goff there, I think they're in there in the spots with Minnesota or Seattle or all those kind of teams.
I agree, because I mean, we've talked about offensive line, probably one of the best run blocking lines, still a pretty good pass blocking. We just talked about the young weapons they have, and they have some good complementary pieces too. And Matt Collins, like not like a true number 2 or 3 receiver, but like some solid like 3s and 4s. And obviously Algier and Rob, like they got talent, and even on defense, like we mentioned before. They got talent. Brought in Jesse Bates. He's a solid safety. They got some veterans on that D line finally, and Calais Campbell, and AJ Terrell's really good too. And so yeah, like and
that's why I asked it too, because like so far their defense, they've allowed 10 points, 24 points, and 20 points. Like that's a pretty good defensive showing.
Yes,
you put that defensive effort with the Chargers, and the Chargers are 3-0 instead of 1-2. So like the defense is playing well. Now they haven't played the cream of the crop of offenses, but that's what I'm like. We've talked about their schedule already on the whole year. Like they play the Jaguars next week, and then they play like the Vikings, and those are like the best offenses they're going to play the whole season.
Wow. The
rest of the year they have like the Saints, the Jets, the Cardinals, the Titans, the Commanders, the Texans, the Colts, the Bears. Like,
I mean, I thought that's not hyperbole. I'm looking at this right now too. This is
like literally the Vikings are the best offense they have remaining, and that's like week, I don't know, like 11 or something, and maybe not even 11, like 9. And then they have the Jaguars next week, and the Jaguars are struggling right now. So if there's any like time to catch the Jaguars, it's right now. But
that's
literally like they don't play any high-powered offenses throughout the rest of the year. So like the defense could have a solid season, and that's why I'm saying like if you were to put even just a mediocre QB like a Jared Goff in that offense, I really think this team could like actually make a run and be like a serious team. And I still think with Desmond Ridder they could because of how weak that schedule is. But if I'm Arthur Smith and the Falcons, I'm kind of wondering like, do I maybe try and capitalize here on the team we have and like go trade for an upgraded QB if by week 8, you feel more confident that Ridder is not the guy.
Yeah, I would, like I said, so yeah, I would put Goff in there. Yeah, I agree with you. Like this, not a lot of good offenses. That like this, it's one of the reasons why I put them in the playoffs for me is because, I mean, I know the Saints have favorable schedule, but they also, like you mentioned, they have a favorable schedule as well, and I think they have better depth and talent. But just depending on if Ridder and the offense the passing offense especially can get going.
Sure. And for clarification, I didn't. For people listening, I'm not saying Goff because I think the Lions are going to trade him. I don't expect them to because they're trying to win their division. But I just as an example of a mediocre QB, you can go out there and get a I don't know, like a Jimmy Garoppolo if the Raiders decide they want to move on, or Kirk if the Vikings decide to sell. There's QBs that are better or around that area.
He's in that average starter tier, which I think just to kind of help those who can understand. Like Mac Jones would probably be a little bit less, but yeah. So understandable. There's a quarterback that's more of a natural passer. I think would definitely be helpful. So we'll see what happens going forward. Still got a lot of season left for both these teams at both 2-1. Let's go to the other NFC North versus NFC South matchup, and it was my Packers. It was looking bad. It was 17-0. I honestly was about to tune out, but then luckily, obviously, unfortunately, Derek Carr got hurt this game, but luckily Packers mounted a comeback in the fourth, down 17-0, score 18 unanswered to win the game over the Saints. First, big home win, first one for Jordan Love at Lambeau. So what were your thoughts in regards to this one?
Obviously, I mean, it sucks for Derek Carr. They were, like you said, up 17-0, and then he goes out, and they weren't able to score any points without him in the second half, which isn't the greatest look for Jameis Winston either. But they didn't have their top 2 running backs either. Kamara's going to come back, so that should be helpful. But in general, I mean, the Packers are looking decent so far. Like I think that Jordan Love has kind of proved, at least to me so far, that like he can play. Mm-hmm. He can play some football. I mean, he's not going to be, at least as of what we've seen as of now, he's not going to be Aaron Rodgers. But in your 3, because it's not his first career start, in his first 4 career starts, if we forget about that one Chiefs game, these 3 games, I think I've been pretty impressed with him. I'm not going to lie. I mean, completion percentage wasn't great against the Saints, but the fact that he was able to use his legs, the fact that he was able to help lead that comeback in the fourth quarter, I thought it was an impressive game from Jordan Love, and it's been an impressive start to the season, I think, for him, considering the fact that I remember like during the offseason, there were reports that this guy sucks. And they were like, oh my gosh, he's going to be terrible, blah, blah, blah. People aren't impressed with what they're seeing. And like I said, he's not proven to be some Hall of Famer like Aaron Rodgers was right out the gate, but he's looking good.
Yeah, I would completely agree. My only little concern, I kind of saw this game, and maybe, with no Christian Watson, and there were no Bakhtiari too, so run game can get going. No Aaron Jones. So overall, very impressive win regardless of performance. But I think a little concerned just in regards to flow and continuity, because as I mentioned, the offense didn't really get going until the fourth quarter, and it is a solid Saints defense. But like in regards to getting I like Love because he's been aggressive. But I think you saw some of the rawness, especially in the first couple of quarters, where he was missing some easy throws, or just trying to be too perfect with the ball at times, and just a little bit too aggressive. I'm not sure if that's him. I'm not sure if that's the mindset. I don't mind it because we're 2-1, and it's a breath of fresh air, as opposed to Rodgers being a little more conservative the past few years. But it'd be nice if Love and LaFleur can kind of find that happy medium, because you can't always rely on the big plays, and your defense holding strong, which is my other point I want to make. Is I know it was 17-0, but Packers defense did pretty well. I mean, 7 of those points were off a kick return, so not really a defense fault.
Sure.
And the other touchdown was we went for on fourth down near midfield, didn't get it, so the Saints only had to drive 40 yards. 40 yards to get a touchdown. We talk about it all the time is, turnovers and easy giving teams half a field to work with. So other than that, and that was still held this team. I know you mentioned, Derek Carr and Winston getting out, but it was still tough sledding for Carr. There wasn't really much in terms of big plays given. And I didn't even know this going into the game, but I learned this at kickoff. Like, there was no Jair Alexander either. So, and still no Eric.
There was a lot
no Eric
a lot
Stokes.
of the best Packers were not playing.
So, yeah, especially, I'm not sure if they were trying to, look ahead, just kind of save some guys for Thursday. We'll see if some of those inactives are active then. But, I'm very happy with this win as a Packer fan. And, for the Saints, it's tough. But, hopefully get your backs back. We'll see with Derek Carr. They're saying it's week to week. And we know Jameis is probably one of the better backups, but with Jameis, it's always the question of will he make that boneheaded mistake in crucial moments, or not in crucial moments, but just in general. Didn't really do it this game, but obviously he was thrusted into the fold unexpectedly. So we'll see how the health of Derek Carr goes, and then for my Packers, see how the short week turnaround affects them heading into the Thursday night game. But very good win there. Which could have been bad if the Packers went 1-2. Saints obviously no longer undefeated. They fall to 2-1. Let's go to the beatdown of the weekend and probably of the season.
No.
I don't expect any other team to score 70 points. The Dolphins did. They remained undefeated. They put the beatdown on the Broncos 70-20. They could do no wrong. I didn't even baller picking out offensive ballers of the week. Like, really, let's just give it to the whole Miami offense. Although you could also give it to the Broncos defense because it was a pretty poor effort. Because even they could have scored more if everyone was following the game. But nonetheless, any quick thoughts in regards to this one?
They did all that without Jalen Waddle.
Yes.
So they didn't even have one of their most explosive playmakers. They literally didn't even need to take a field goal. 70 is 10 touchdowns. Devin Akane, Raheem Mostert both had monster days. I don't know. All I'm going to say is I'm not overreacting to anything in terms of Miami just yet, because I know that some people are already, starting the MVP Super Bowl talk, and we saw that last year, which is why I'm hesitant to be like, oh yeah, they're the real deal yet. But they're looking really freaking good, and I'll give them that credit. And on the Broncos side, that might be the worst defense in the league. I mentioned it, I previewed it last week where I said I've been kind of disappointed in how the Broncos' defensive performances have looked so far, because against Washington, which is not that great of an offensive unit, they allowed 35 points. And then they come out and they allowed the Dolphins to get 70. I don't know. That was just a really kind of embarrassing performance, to be honest.
Yeah, that's literally what Sean Payton was definitely not happy after the game. I'm sure you saw that one.
Yeah.
Presser where he was like, what's the question? He was like, yes, it was embarrassing. So, and by the way, update. At least this was per Adam Schefter. Apparently, it's Devin A-Chan, not even A-Chain or Aka.
A-Chain?
It's not A-Chain, it's A-Chan. So
A-Chan?
Yes, that's apparently what it is.
Oh, okay.
So shout out, because as a fellow person who has had sometimes people call me Chan, i.e. teachers, because I guess sometimes my U's look like N's when I write my last name. So A-Chan. Apparently it's the correct pronunciation, but good to see him pop off. I'm not sure if that's obviously not going to be sustainable, 200 yards every week, but he's showing why they got him. And I was concerned coming out on, we'll see, as the season goes on, like you mentioned, only 1 week, if he can continue to take the abuse of the NFL, because size and just durability was a concern, at least of mine, for him, running between the tackles, but they had no issues. And yeah, I do want to credit Mike McDaniels, because I didn't know this until I was listening to a fantasy podcast today. I know fantasy and real life are a little bit different, but it goes to show how well Mostert's been playing. But yeah, Raheem Mostert's RB1. He only had 82 yards. He didn't have 3 touchdowns, rushing wise, and a receiving touchdown. But nonetheless, the run game for the Miami has been also extremely revelation. Like last year was like one of those things where, later towards the year, I think we saw it kind of got going, but for most of the year, it wasn't a huge factor, the run game. But we're starting to see this year, last week, New England, it was a much closer game, a game where they obviously weren't scoring 70, but the passing game was, New England was over was on top of their things, but they were still able to lean on Mostert to make a few plays. So, yeah, if they can do that, and if that defense can keep, getting better under Fangs, I'm like, this is definitely one of the more talented teams, but like you mentioned, we just got to keep seeing them do this into December, into January for the Dolphins, especially a team breaking on speed. Like we always mention, January football, when you got to go play, in the colder weather and stuff, it could be tough. But hey, if they somehow get the 1 seed and the AFC has to go through Miami, who knows? But, and I will tip a hat to yes, he did play a great game. And
I mean, shoot, when you got an offensive performance like that from everybody, that's one of those games where everybody popped off. Yeah, everybody.
Yeah, it was the ultimate revenge game too. That's the last point I want to make. The ultimate revenge game, because remember, Miami got in trouble, lost their first round pick because they were trying to bring in Sean Payton, and there's also, and some fans want to deny this, but it seems like there's too much smoke for it not to be real. Brady was apparently trying to also come in to be the quarterback with Peyton. So I'm sure there was a lot of bulletin board material for McDaniels and Tua coming into this game. Huge win for the Dolphins, at least obviously. And we'll see how Denver can rebound going forward, because the Sean Payton era has not gone off to a good start. And technically, I think gone off to a worse start than the Nathaniel Hackett era, but different teams, different situations. So
let me just say too that I saw some people blaming Russell Wilson for this game, which I find preposterous. Like, what do you mean? He didn't have the best performance, but 23 of 38 is not great in terms of completion percentage, but he had 306 yards. He threw a touchdown and he threw 1 pick. But he could literally have completed all 38 of those passes and they would still lose. They gave up 70 points. Yes. What do you want from him?
Yeah, and then,
I don't know.
Well, and then there are times too, Cortland Sutton. I mean, he had 2 fumbles. If you want to point the finger, I'm usually wondering, hey, I'll point the finger at Russell, but this is not really around Russell. This is especially, I'm more pointing the finger on the defense too. People have mentioned, have some pride, and they were trying to run out the clock. Points? They were trying to run out the clock with Devin Achan, but in the second half, in the second half, but. Agents had a wide open lane after wide open lane. It was just sure. So, if I'm Sean Payton, I'm looking at the defense a little bit guys, we got to have better effort. I know we were losing. I know the game's over, but you can't just let them run out. They're trying to run out the clock on us, and we still couldn't stop them.
But also, and this is crazy too, because I declared Pat Surtain as the best cornerback in the NFL, which maybe he had given up. But late in the game, he got burned by Chosen Anderson and Mike White for a 68-yard touchdown. That was him in the game, Pat Surtain, unless there was a different number 2 on the field. I'm pretty sure that was Pat Surtain. So I don't know. Like you said, I find it. I understand if people want to say, oh, maybe they should trade Russell Wilson or whatever now, because considering the amount of money they gave him, and they're an 0-3 football team who, like I said, could arguably have the worst defense in the NFL, considering what we just saw. I mean, this just doesn't seem like a situation in which they should be committing that much money to a quarterback, basically. But I don't know who would trade for Russell Wilson at this point. They're not going to do it, but that's the only criticism I can see of Russ after this game, because if you're blaming Russell Wilson for them giving up 70 points, you're looking at the wrong thing. That was a shameful performance from everybody. But I think that Russell Wilson was not nearly bad enough for anyone to be looking at him. I mean, if anything, in terms of the offensive, or just the only positive thing I would take away from this game is, wow, they threw for 300 yards. Sutton had 91 receiving yards and a touchdown. Judy had 81 receiving yards. Marvin Mims had 73. Your 3 starting receivers all had over 70 yards. That's a positive. That's the only thing that's positive about this game.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, everyone, Russell's pretty far on the totem pole for this game in regards to who gets the blame. Like there's a lot, like we were saying, there's just a lot of the people you can point the finger at in regards to assigning blame, quote unquote. But yeah, so that's that. Let's move over to what was actually a shootout, so one of the more exciting games, and it was the Chargers getting the win 28-24 over the Minnesota Vikings. Both these teams desperately needed this win. What were your thoughts on the Chargers getting their first win of the season?
I'm really interested to hear the media narratives following this game, because I already heard it last week that Justin Herbert, because they were 0-2, they were like, oh, Herbert's not clutch. They started pulling out the stats of how many drives they had in which they could have taken the lead or extended the lead in the fourth quarter, and they failed to. All these kind of numbers to say that he doesn't have the clutch gene, blah, blah, blah. But now in this game against the Vikings, Brandon Staley has that really idiotic decision to go for it on 4th and 1 on their own 25-yard line, which failed running the ball. So they gave it to Kirk, and Kirk throws an interception. So I'm wondering, are they going to declare Herbert as clutch? Are they going to declare Kirk Cousins as not clutch? Like, what is the narrative that's going to come out of this game? Because quite frankly, it was just a very unfortunate situation for Minnesota. I don't know if you saw the play in which Herbert threw his third touchdown to, was it Josh Palmer got it? It was a tipped interception that fell in Josh Palmer's lap. Like, it was not a great throw. It was underthrown. And it goes to be a touchdown, which I will take as a fantasy owner of Herbert. And then Kirk Cousins, on his interception that he threw, was also tipped and then picked off.
Yeah, so
it wasn't the greatest to throw anyways. But the point being, like, I don't know. I'm just very interested to see how the media narratives go following this one. Just general thoughts on the game. Chargers had no run offense. They're sorely missing Austin Eckler, but Herbert once again stepped up. I mean, the guy threw for 400 yards, although that one last touchdown pass was not great. He still threw for 3 touchdowns. Keenan Allen is going absolutely berserk. Yes. 215 receiving yards on 18 catches.
And he threw a touchdown.
18 catches. Yeah, and he threw a touchdown too. And 18 catches was on 20 targets. So, like, it wasn't like he had 30 targets. No, he had 20 and he got 18 of them. Crazy. For the Vikings, good to see Alexander Madison get back in it. The offense was moving the ball as well. But Minnesota just stalled out in the red zone a lot, which I think was kind of what was their Achilles heel here. And it showed up in the worst moment at the end of the game. And then the most unfortunate news being Mike Williams unfortunately tore his ACL in the game. He had a really good performance too, but he's going to be out for the year. So who knows? Maybe we see more Josh Palmer and specifically more Quentin Johnston.
Hoping Quentin Johnson, but I don't know. Sounds like they're going with Palmer, I guess, because I'm not. Hopefully, maybe that's just because he's been there longer. But yeah, I'm with you. Like Johnson feels like he fits more the Mike Williams role perfectly.
Yeah,
but so we'll see. But
he should get at least more snaps than he's currently getting.
Yes, absolutely.
Because when they run 3 wide receiver sets, like, I can't see a world in which they're going. I don't even know. Is it Darius Davis is the next receiver up?
I guess so.
I can't see that.
Unless you want to line up Gerald Everett as out wide. Or, I don't know. But, so yeah, I do want to, you mentioned Herbert. Obviously, he was awesome. And I do want to note, too, like, Minnesota, we know their defense isn't very well, but I think, I forgot the stat exactly, but Herbert was like, they just threw the blitz at Herbert. That's also why they couldn't run, because they were just like, screw it. Like, we can't get any pressure with 4. We got to just send the house and hope we get there. And they only got there once in terms of a sack. Herbert was awesome. And then
I think the stat was like, so far on the season, he has like the most passing yards against the blitz through 3 games in like NFL history or something like that.
Yeah. Well,
I think teams are blitzing them heavy.
Well, and I think it helped that like this game, literally, I think